Hello, everyone, and welcome to a late night edition of the Human Echoes Recap. We are back to talk about Season 8 of Game of Thrones. Episode 1 just dropped. It's called Winterfell, and let's get right to it. The number one thing that you'll notice about this episode, and you're probably going to hear it from a few different sources, is how much it mirrors Episode 1 of Game of Thrones. All the way back to the beginning, you're going to see tons of different things that are full-on mirrors of basically things that we'd seen before, and it's kind of amazing how they interlace some of this stuff together. Whenever I was taking notes, I kind of noticed it right off the bat. I confirmed a few things online. So this is just some of the rudimentary things that I picked up that mirror this episode. And it's also going to kind of go maybe a little out of sequence. Before we go any further, spoilers ahead. Just so you know, spoilers ahead. This is a recap of the episode. We're discussing it. We're reviewing it. We want your comments. We want all that stuff. But if you haven't seen it, don't watch this if you don't want to be spoiled. There we go. Alright, so the first thing you're going to notice in this episode is a king and a queen riding into Winterfell on their horses. Pretty obvious, but you had Robb and Cersei before. Now you have, of course, Jon Snow and Daenerys. It's one of those things where it's just a full-on mirror. There's so many different little mirror things happening here. You've got Arya watching from the sides again, except this time she lets a little kid that was her age whenever she saw him in. You see just the way everybody's kind of looking at each other. It's the same feeling. You've got this out-of-place army coming into the north. People aren't exactly trustworthy, but they're also not that scared until the dragons show up, and that definitely turns some heads. But there's so many other little things that start here, too. I mean, even the wedding talk just pops up a lot. Like, you had them talking about how Jon and Daenerys might need to get married to convince the Northerners that they're going to have that. And there was a lot of marriage talk in the first episode of that. We were looking at two houses being joined together. Which is also kind of funny because you have the whole new chemistry that we got between Arya and Gendry. So you've got, like, the whole thing going back to, like, I have a son, you have a daughter, let them be wed. And now you've got kind of a different chemistry going on. One of the actual sons, instead of Joffrey, of Robert Baratheon and Arya. But that's not even close to where all these different similarities, like, kind of come together. You've got that first part where you see, or the end part of this episode, but it's the first time that Jaime has seen Bran in so long, and just, like, the stare that's given there. You've got so many different fun things here, and a lot of it comes back to the crypt. Like, inside the crypt, you got Jon in front of his father's statue. And he said the next time that he saw him, they would talk about his mother. This is where Sam breaks in and basically tells him of his origins. And I'm kind of surprised that he didn't question this more and wasn't more upset that he'd been having fun with his aunt. But I think there's just so much to unpack there. Like, so much of the mysteries of his life that it wasn't something that was going to leave him thinking about Daenerys. It's thinking about himself, thinking about the fact that he is the true heir to the kingdom. And he gave up his crown. And it's so much to unpack in that moment. Which, by the way, Sam in this episode, top notch. There are so many things that are sad that we're going to get into there that he just kind of, like, he brings more into this. He brings a lot more feeling into this than most of the characters will. You've got a lot of really cold people. But there are reunions in this episode that show that it's not all cold. Like, you've got Arya in her reunion with Jon, where, like, she tries to be, like the faceless one's minion, where she's being very just disinterested, and it breaks, and they embrace, and it's close, and it's kind. You even have her kind of getting flirty, which we haven't really seen much whenever she's talking to Gendry. Which, I want to know what you guys think that drawing was. I couldn't tell. It looked like some sort of arrow or spear or some sort of launcher, or even maybe a blow dart gun. Like, because I know the Faceless Men would use poisons and things like that. It would make sense that even just a little blow dart with obsidian might be able to kill a White Walker. We'll have to see. But there's so much to unpack between the chemistry there, and that was really fun to see. Like, it was just a little bit different than what we're used to seeing out of Arya, and it's nice because she's sort of getting her humanity back. Also, I kind of dig the new costume. She'd been in the same digs for a while, and I think that it just looks cool. It's a nice little addition. Some of the other similarities is you have Sansa looking at the queen very kind of distrustfully, and also even the saying, Winterfell is yours, is a direct reflection on something that happened in that first episode, in the pilot episode. And Sansa at this point really has taken over as being Catelyn Stark. Like, she is the Lady of Winterfell. And it's like, it's great to see her growing as a character. The only thing I didn't like from her in this episode is I don't understand her beef with Tyrion anymore. Like, she saw what a really bad husband was with Ramsay. She was protected as much as Tyrion could by... Sansa was protected as much by Tyrion as she could be. It was one of those things where I feel like Tyrion did his absolute best. He was respectful of her. He didn't ask too much of her. And to have her be kind of cold in return, although she did have one of the best lines in the movie, they're talking about how bad the purple wedding was, and she's like, it had its moments, and that's very, very true for her. But I feel like she doesn't owe Tyrion anything, but I'm kind of surprised that she's still being that cold to him. Like, there should have just been a little bit more kindness, I felt there, but I'm not sure Sansa has room in her life for kindness. It's kind of like what Bran said, we're wasting time here. Also, Bran was a lot more useful in this episode than you generally get from him. A lot of times he's just cryptic. This time he's actually dropping info. It's like, you have a zombie dragon on the loose. Like, telling direct things. Daenerys didn't respond to that in any sort of way that seemed realistic to me. Like, I would have thought that she would have been more concerned. But this is sort of an abridged episode that's setting the table for everything to come. So you're not going to get, like, the interactions that you kind of hope for that would be a little bit more realistic for these characters. If she is the mother of dragons, she cares so much about her dragons, knowing the fate of that one seems like it would be more concerning. Instead, her and Jon Snow go on, like, a Disney ride, fly off to some other area and bang. Which, I mean, Jon Snow knows how to set a date. Like, he knows that waterfalls, he knows caves, all this other stuff are really a good way to get women naked in his life. It's worked for him before. It's a tried and true formula. Do your thing, Jon. Also, there are a lot of people saying that it makes more sense that Jon was able to ride the dragon because he is Targaryen, that if he didn't have Targaryen blood, that they wouldn't let him. I'm not entirely sure that makes sense, but it's something that's a theory on a lot of different boards. But we already know that he's a Targaryen, so it doesn't really prove anything. It's just kind of an interesting idea that they might have been able to pick up on before. I want to go back to the crypts for 1 second, where another similarity is this is where Ned was asked to be Hand of the King, and this is where Sam ended up telling Jon that he is the king, that he has been the king the whole time. It's kind of interesting, just another parallel where they just keep layering it on in this episode, and the writing was just very, very good for the overall thing, the overall episode context, but some of the dialogue and things didn't quite work for me. I felt like, once again, we're in fast-forward Game of Thrones mode. The fact that Jaime gets up there, the fact that just everything is happening so quickly, the dragon glass is there, everything is there, without being like 3 months of journeying, is annoying, but it's still like, we have to get the story done. Like, I'm sure when George R.R. Martin writes it out, there'll be different endings and it'll satisfy the need for the hyper-realistic fantasy group, but I'm still super excited that it's back, that we got this episode today, that 2 years have waited, and I hate to sound like I was negative there. I enjoyed this a lot, but there are nits to pick with any sort of show like this, so we're going to get through some of those. I guess it comes back to, like, what are the new things and what did we learn with this episode? The new things start out right away. You've got a new introduction, which actually is showing the advancing of the White Walkers with these lighter blue squares. And it stops, I think, in Hearthhome, which is actually where this episode ends, where you've got Umber pinned to the wall. I know that's not the actual ending, but that's where kind of our last indicator of where the White Walkers are, and also the thing that freaked everybody the hell out. It's also got a great line from Tormund about how his eyes are always blue, which I don't know if he's ever seen himself in a mirror to really know that sort of thing. I'm sure people have told him, but it's still one of those that's kind of an interesting thing of like, does he really know what he looks like? He's not exactly taking care of himself there. But it was a good little scene. We got to see Beric Dondarrion doing his thing, all that. We know that the North needs a reason to trust Daenerys. They've had enough kind of turnover with kings lately that they really don't want to have to be doing this again. They had Robb, they had Jon, then Jon rescinds his crown, and now they've got, like, the queen, and they don't really care for these southern queens, and she's not exactly, like, a true southern queen. Like, she didn't grow up in King's Landing, but she grew up elsewhere. She's a conqueror. She's earned a lot of distrust, and considering what she does to Sam later in this episode, I think that's pretty founded. So this is why they're talking about marriage, and it's something that's been pretty obvious that there's that chemistry, that they're already hooking up. It probably just needs to happen so that they can have their king. They can have King Jon Snow and Queen Daenerys. Like, I don't know if he's going to take, like, what name he's going to take, anything like that, or if he's going to end up being Aegon by the end of this. But it is kind of interesting. And while we're on the subject, it's not exactly out of the question for Targaryens to intermarry family members. Usually it's siblings instead of, like, aunt and all that. But it's still pretty twisted, and I wouldn't put it past them for making that happen. We know that Cersei now has a new army, and that she's basically the only living adversary. She did send Bronn down to, like, kill Tyrion and Jaime, but I don't think Bronn's going to do that. Bronn has actually had a character arc where he went from basic sellsword to a lord. He doesn't have any loyalty to Cersei, even if she's paying him up front. That used to be the only thing he worried about for loyalty, but I honestly don't see it happening. Like, I don't see him killing Tyrion. I don't see him killing Jaime. Like, he facilitated their meetups before, even whenever it was something that could have gotten him killed in most other circumstances. If he wasn't in so tight with both of them, it would have been a major, major risk beyond what he was facing. I really don't think anything's going to come to that. But Cersei does have the remnants of the Lannister army, as well as the Golden Company. And the Golden Company is a mercenary group from over the sea that is absolutely terrifying, proficient, and perfect at what they do. But are they going to be the ones that are willing to follow orders in the face of complete annihilation from the White Walkers? Are they going to just want to get on their ships and go? Are they going to fight against these other armies, like the Unsullied, that are trying to save Westeros? I really don't know if a mercenary group can be committed and loyal enough to pull that off. It seems like the humanity would come through. Maybe I'm trying to look at a too positive note for this type of show. There's not a lot of humanity in Game of Thrones, but it seems like there could be enough that the Golden Company would end up helping and then maybe attacking, but I just don't see it being something where it's just straight up black and white, they go and try to kill everybody else. Cersei's machinations are kind of interesting right now. She's mostly trying to survive, but she's also trying to tie up some loose ends, and we'll see where that ends up for Jaime. I don't feel like Jaime gets through this series alive, but he might end up finding that he's Kingslayer again, like say if Jon turns or anything like that. Like, there could be any number of things that make him Kingslayer or Queenslayer. Like, he could end up taking his own life after, like, being rid of Cersei. There's so many different things that are going to be answered. I know that episode 3 is one of the first major battle episodes, so we'll be keeping an eye on that whenever that comes down the pipe. Another thing, we're starting to see the implications of Daenerys' hardcore killing of prisoners. I already talked about how this was probably the most effective acting in this episode was Tarly's character. And when Sam realizes that his father has died, and like this is literally the queen coming to him to thank him for saving Jorah. And it turns from a situation where like everybody's kind of excited and he's like, "Oh, would you pardon me for taking my family's sword?" And she's like, "Oh, lol, he's not going to care because he's dead." And then he's like, "Well, at least I can go back home and see my brother." And it's like, he died too. Which I still think that Dickon's death is kind of... She shouldn't have had that happen. She should have forced Dickon to live. Like, if he wanted to take his own life later, whatever. But don't end up killing the father and the son for a noble house. I know you want to break the wheel, but that's something that, like, the old school Targaryens would do, and it's not going to curry any favors. And this is the first time she's seen consequences of that. This makes it so Sam is not going to be loyal to her. He's not going to be trying to let Jon marry her. He's going to be as divisive as possible, and we saw the underpinnings of this earlier. Whenever he's saying, would she give up her crown to save her people? She doesn't fully have people. She's got the Dothraki, which she inherited, and they are definitely loyal to her. She's got the Unsullied, which are her people, and she's got people that she's freed from slavery. But she doesn't have a group of people that absolutely love her, especially not in Westeros. Like, other than the Unsullied and the Dothraki, which are formidable armies, she doesn't have the love of the people. And a lot of last season was about trying to not just outright conquer, but also win the hearts and minds of people. And with stuff like this with Tarly, I think she's going to be having a really rough time with that. This is a bigger note than people are wanting to give it credit for. I don't think Tarly is going to stab her in the back. I don't think it's that bad. But he's going to be a thorn in her side because he cannot trust her to make the right choice. He knows that Jon is a rightful and good king, and she is not, especially after murdering his family and kind of being nonchalant about it. Like, I know that whenever you're a queen, you can't really apologize. Like, that's second-guessing yourself. That's making it seem like your word is not law. But this is a big thing. And I'm really interested to see how it's going to affect it if this is the reason why she doesn't get the throne later. They kind of hinted at that back in Season 2 whenever they showed her almost getting to the throne, but it was frozen over. I don't know if she's actually going to reach the throne, and it's actions like that that are going to stop it from happening. So I think that that is a huge plot point. We only have 5 episodes left to figure it out, but we will revisit that as things come up. We also know that the White Walkers are getting very, very close. The teaser after this showed like the battle was going to be happening. I think that the next episode is going to be preparation for battle. People have said that that battle's happening in episode 3, or at least the first main battle. One of the first of the longer episodes, because they're like 78, 80 minutes, 80 minutes. There's a few longer ones coming up. This was only about 50, 55 minutes, somewhere in that range. But they are not very far. You saw the Umber Child dispatched to go and rally his people to come and help at Winterfell, and he never makes it home. Like, you see Beric Dondarrion going into their keep. I thought it was like a monastery at first, but I think that's just the Umber house. And whenever they go in there, they end up finding the Umber Child stapled to the wall with the whole spiral pattern. And one thing that's been bugging the hell out of me tonight, I've had so many people like talking about how doesn't that look like the Targaryen symbol? No, it doesn't. It's a spiral. Like the Targaryen thing is a circle with a 3-headed dragon. That's like saying that if you saw a basketball hoop, it would look like the Targaryen symbol. No, it doesn't. Stop. I know you think you're clever on Reddit and you're thinking you see something that's not. It's literally spiral, spiral, spiral. That's it. Like, it's a simple thing. It goes back to the Children of the Forest. It's not a Targaryen symbol. Alright, sorry. That was bugging me a lot. I read that comment so many times tonight, and I have no clue why anybody thought that was a thing. Like, I'm still at a loss. There is a plot point that I'm not entirely sure about, where they went out and they're like, the dragons are barely eating anything. It's like, oh, they ate like 18 goats and a few sheep. Well, that seems like a fair amount, but they are massive, and this led them to be on their little like magic carpet ride into the waterfall caves of Banging. But like, what does that mean? Does that mean that the dragons are depressed because they're in the north and they don't like the cold? Does that mean that there's something physically wrong with them? Are they mourning the loss of the other dragon? Like, is there something going on here, or was that just some way to bridge them going out and seeing the dragons? Because they acted like they were fine. They even got a little bit like Creepshow on them whenever Drogon was kind of staring at them making out. It was a good moment of levity in the episode. It's like, how are you supposed to like get down with the get down whenever there is literally a dragon staring at you? Especially because the other dragon is named after your dad. Like, that's just weird. And, I mean, we saw him riding a dragon that was named after his dad. Then he rode the other dragon. He might have been, like, well, we won't get into positions here. But there was a lot of riding of dragons in this episode. And it's weird that you can kind of support that even when you know it's incest because they're so far apart. It's a really weird thing. I do have another nit to pick with this episode, and that is that rescuing Yara was way too easy. Like, I remember whenever Yara went to rescue Theon, and like it was a botched rescue mission, how there was a lot of prep, there was a lot of like force, there was a lot of death on both sides, and they ended up not being able to succeed because he was brainwashed and he was basically a broken man. I like that they rescued Yara. I like that she's back being a player again, but they were literally in port in King's Landing surrounded by hundreds of other ships. Somebody's going to notice somebody getting on that ship, especially because that's probably the closest one to the docks. Unless it was in some other secret docks close to the castle or something like that. It just didn't seem like it was going to make sense, and it was way too easy. I don't think the Greyjoys took any damage. They did go all like ninja assassin and break their way in. It was kind of cool, but there wasn't enough build up to that happening. They just did it, which in some ways, maybe that's better. Like, we don't need to see battle plans, but it does seem like it's too easy, especially considering that Theon isn't exactly the greatest military leader of all time. He did take Winterfell for a bit, but this is different. In the end, a lot of things have changed in this one episode. This is setting up this entire season to kind of fall into place. We saw Jaime coming off the road, out of his former glory, out of his like blonde hair and gold armor and everything to just being basically a commoner with nothing to his name. We saw him see the sins of his past in Bran and get stared down by the creepy three-eyed raven. We saw Jon Snow basically see his entire paradigm shift. Jon Snow basically died in those crypts tonight. The idea, the concept of the bastard Jon Snow fell in those crypts. Those crypts are now like basically another person is living down there because now it's Aegon Targaryen. He knows the truth. He's had a lot of different revelations over the past few years, but this one is going to change who he is. Not necessarily in the Valor sense, but there's going to be a lot of different shifts that have to be happening in his mind right now about what's right. He's already mad at his father for being so untruthful, but as Sam said, it was to protect him because Robert would have killed him. It's the right thing to do from Ned, but it still has to hurt a little bit. And I wonder how much different it would have been if it would have come from Ned's mouth. Like, I feel like the impact would have been blunted quite severely. I suppose most of the thing that comes with that is, like, what is his reaction going to be? Is he going to just embrace this name? Is he going to get married? Is he going to, for now, just worry about the battle that's coming? Like, how is he going to keep the morale of his soldiers? How is he going to make Winterfell united with a queen? Like, there's so many things that he has to worry about. It's like, Bran said it best, we don't have time for this. But it's also essential, and Bran was the one who told them to set it up. It's more like all these introductions, all these formalities, all these other things. They want to get through it so that they can actually get to the business of defeating the White Walkers. Which, at this point, the Unsullied and everybody else are a formidable army, but it's like, are they good enough to actually do this? Is Game of Thrones going to have the true grimdark ending where evil wins? Where, I guess it's not even so much evil, it's just the cold side wins, because there's so much evil in humanity in this series. I still think we're going to get Clegane Bowl. There's a lot that has to happen in the South for this series to wrap up. Like, there's something that has to happen with Cersei. There's something that has to happen to get the Cleganes back in the same space. There's so many different things that they've led up to that the North isn't the only focus of the next few episodes. And I honestly don't know who's going to take the throne, if anybody even will. I kind of think that they might go grimdark and just nobody gets it. The Night King gets it. Or it's just a full-on, like, dead zone. Who knows? Winner might take all. But I'm guessing it's not going to be something like that. It could very well be Bran. It could be someone who doesn't want the throne. It could be Jon. I want to know who you guys think is going to end up on the throne. I want to know what you thought of this episode, what you would improve on, what you think is going to happen going forward. Are they going to embrace Jaime, or is this the end of Jaime and he's going to face the end in front of the Daenerys because he literally killed her father and put her family into hiding? Like, he's got so many different opposing factors right here. And to them, a right-handed knight that has no hand might not be that great for combat. He's a great strategist, but is that enough to save his life? I know he's going to make an impassioned plea in front of those people. We'll see if that ends up turning out. What other revelations is Bran going to have? Are Arya and Gendry going to get shipped? What all's happening? Tell me what you guys think. I really want to know in the comments. I will be responding to all comments, or hit us up at Human Echoes on pretty much every platform. I hope you guys have an excellent night. We will see you over the next 6 episodes with these recaps. I might be able to get Komet onto one, but for now it's just going to be me because it's just logistically easier. And I hope you guys have an excellent night. And yeah, bye.